Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Esoteric and our continuing series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. And today I have a video that's unlike anything else I've done before, because as opposed to talking about what's coming or what is currently on MiSTer, I'm going to be talking about my 2023 wish list, because 2022 was an amazing year, and I think there's a lot of awesome stuff that could come to MiSTer. Now, don't think that I'm saying that MiSTer is deficient. This is not me saying it's not doing a good job. This is just me talking about some of the fun things that I think we could get on the system that would be capable as far as the FPGA is concerned. You're not going to see anything like Dreamcast or PlayStation 2 on this list, but something like Sega System 32, based on the spec, seems like it should run on the MiSTer. And it has such a ton of fun games on it. Something like Golden Axe, The Revenge of Death Adder is an absolutely spectacular beat 'em up, and the Sega System 32 did a lot of fun things with scaling. Now we have the 16 and the 16B from Hotego, but it would be fun to see something like System 32 on MiSTer as well, because these type of games are absolutely iconic, and they're definitely, at least spec-wise, seeming like they would fit in the logic element capacity of MiSTer, because don't forget, with the board, there are things that it isn't capable of. That's why we can have something like PlayStation 1, but not something like Dreamcast. It just has to do with the capabilities of the FPGA chip, and I know certain people have talked about working on a Sega System 32 core, and I really hope that we see some more progress on that in 2023, but I do want to know what you guys want to see come to MiSTer as well. So leave me a comment down below and tell me what you'd love to see on the platform. Just remember, keep it realistic, don't say techno parrot, it's not going to happen. But on the System 32 side, again, something like Radmobile is an absolutely spectacular game to look at in motion, and this would look incredible to play on MiSTer. Now, a lot of times, developers need original boards for these projects so they can reverse engineer the silicon, and any boards that I do have that anyone might need to borrow in a non-destructive manner, I definitely would be willing to loan them out if I trust the person developing the core. But if you do have some of these boards, remember that you can donate them to different core makers for them to work on cores for MiSTer. Even if they are broken, they can still be reverse engineered. But something like Alien 3 The Gun is just an amazing game. It's not a light gun game, it uses XY potentiometers, so you could play with a control stick or an analog stick, but seeing something like this on MiSTer would be amazing, because these are not cheap boards, and they're not easy boards to set up. You have to do a lot of custom wiring if you do not have a cabinet. And while MAME emulation is good for them, having them in FPGA would just be an absolute blast. We have so many Sega cores currently, and more on the way, and the Sega Saturn core is still in development, but I'd love to see a little bit more love on the Sega arcade side, because these are iconic games that I remember from growing up, and I've got a lot of the boards in my closet, and I just have an absolute blast when I'm playing them. Now the next one is console related. You can leave a comment if you want saying it sucks, it's all engagement to me, but that is a 3DO core, because it is one of my favorite consoles of all time. I'm not going to tell you it's the best console of all time, and I'm not going to tell you it succeeded in the face of the PlayStation 1, but there's still a lot of fun to be had on the 3DO, and I do hope we see it on MiSTer. I do know that it is being in some way, shape, or form worked on as far as FPGA code is concerned. Don't let anyone tell you this platform has nothing on it. That is not true. It is not the best library in the world, but it is better than a lot of things that we currently do have cores for, in my opinion. I don't know where all the hate for 3DO comes from. People just seem to dislike it, and that's fine if you don't like it. No big deal, but if somebody wants to make a core, don't try to stop them. It's fun. Let people have their fun. Something like Killing Time, I think it's one of my favorite games of all time, but you leave me a comment down below and you tell me, how do you feel about the 3DO, because I would be curious. I know a lot of people that watch my channel enjoy it, because that's how I started the whole thing off with the 3DO M2. But back over to the arcade side, we have stuff like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in development, but Konami has an absolute glut of amazing beat-em-up games that run on 16-bit hardware that are all in some way, shape, or form hardware design derivatives of earlier boards. Konami loved releasing a lot of different platforms, but they always loved making them similar-ish to what came before it. Something like Violent Storm is one of Konami's best games of all time, and it has, I think, the best soundtrack in any arcade game. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds and imagine this coming out of your MiSTer. Enjoy! just one of the best arcade soundtracks of all time. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think the best arcade music is. But this video isn't about music, it's about awesome cores that we could have come to MiSTer. And while the arcade side of things is blossoming every single month, the arcade lineage and history of what could be available is absolutely massive. Something like Konami alone, there's so many different games that we could be playing, and I do hope that some of these do end up in development because they are an absolute blast, and they're all running on 16-bit hardware for the most part, and there's similar boards that are working on MiSTer now, so that's why I kind of hope we do get these things. There's such an amazing roster of games from Konami alone. The one hard thing about Konami is that they rarely if ever reuse the same hardware, so it's not like getting one game working guarantees you're going to get 3 or 4 along with it. They developed more arcade PCBs than I'm pretty sure any other manufacturer did. They would release an arcade PCB with 2 games on it and move on. But something like G.I. Joe, more of a run-and-gun pseudo first-person shooter, is just spectacular, and MAME emulation has a lot of flaws. It is complicated hardware, and I'm not pretending that any of these cores would be easy things to make. I personally admit I do not have the coding skill for it. That is not my forte. But it would still be amazing to see these sort of things run, and I know a lot of people love these games, so hopefully some of the core developers love them as well, because I know a lot of people make cores for things that they just want to see. Or something like Vendetta here, maybe not the best Konami beat 'em up of all time, but it is still up there, and it's still a lot of fun. It would be great to see more of these things preserved in FPGA, because these boards are not getting any more common, and on the Konami side at least, emulation can be a little bit hit or miss, or on MiSTer more often than not, it is highly accurate. It's not a knock against MAME, I think they do an amazing job. I'm just talking about a different version of the same thing that I would love to see on MiSTer. I just say that because people always leave comments saying I like one thing more than the other, whether that's original hardware, software emulation, or FPGA cores. I love everything. I just want as many ways for people to play these games as possible. But moving over to the Taito Type F3, this is another board I would love to see get a little bit more love, and that's mostly because using the actual arcade board is a metric pain in the butt. The sync rate on it is a disaster, and even with a scaler, trying to get it to sync to anything can be a real chore. You need to modify the board itself. But something like Riding Fight is a sprite scaling beat 'em up that takes place on a hoverboard. Taito has a ton of fun games, and the F3 is an awesome platform. I'm just showing you guys a couple games from it, but you have Bubble Symphony, you have Bubble Memories, a lot of different fun to be had. And the great thing about MiSTer in general is that it takes away a lot of the challenge of having to deal with the original arcade board. I've owned Taito F3s before. I have sold them because I only had one TV that would even sync to them, and I had to go into the service menu and constantly play around with it to try to get an image. It was just more trouble in my opinion than it was worth to own original hardware, so if we could have it on MiSTer, it would be incredible. Or something like Lightbringer here, more of like an isometric beat 'em up. It is amazing. Now this one was ported to home consoles, but something like Riding Fight has not really shown up on anything, so this would be a great way to enjoy these games from the comfort of your couch, or put them in an arcade cabinet with any sort of MiSTer JAMA device so that you could enjoy things like this. It would just be great to see more F3, but there's F2 as well. Taito has a long lineage of arcade boards. These are just some of the things I wish would come, but like I said, leave me a comment, tell me what you want to see. Now on the Namco side, there is one game more than any other I hope comes to MiSTer at some point in time, and that is the Outfoxies. It's basically something like Power Stone before Power Stone existed. It is a 2D fighting game that kind of feels more like an arena fighter, and there are so many different power-ups. This game is just wild and crazy, and playing it with a friend, it becomes an absolute blast. This is the type of game where you're just going to be running around, yelling at each other, saying what's going on screen. It's just, from start to finish, spectacular. It also has an incredible soundtrack, so give this one like 25 seconds and I will be right back.
Kill your enemy by any means. Gun. Rocket launcher. Rocket launcher. Gun. Gun. Gun.
It's just so much fun, and I would love to play it on MiSTer FPGA, but I did ask some people in the MiSTer Discord, and one that I heard more than once was Rolling Thunder, also from Namco, and this is an absolute classic game. It is a little bit before my time, but I still absolutely love it, and some of the animations are spectacular, like when you go over that railing there, this is just impressive stuff. So to have something like this on MiSTer would also be fun, and that's the whole fun of this, is we can kind of just talk about what we would love to see. Now, on a very strange tangent, one of my favorite games of all time that I just would love to see coming out of MiSTer would be something like Warrior Blade Rosten Saga 3. This plays with two monitors side by side, and you can emulate it, but if you have original hardware, the most accurate way to play, getting two monitors close enough is an absolute mess of a system. I owned this board a long time ago, and I got rid of it because I couldn't deal with it. I would put two CRTs next to each other, but the bezels were just an absolute mess, so I moved on from it, and I wish I'd kept it because it costs a fortune to buy it now. But seeing these games handled in FPGA would just be fun from a curiosity standpoint of how it would do it, because Taito had 2-up monitors side by side, and they also had 3-monitor games as well. This was ultra-wide gaming before ultra-wide gaming ever was a thing with current monitors, and I can only imagine hooking up a MiSTer to an ultra-wide monitor, because I have two, and playing something like Warrior Blade on it. I think it would just be spectacular, and I think MiSTer has really well positioned to do things like this because it is so user, changeable, and core developers can go in and do different things with aspect ratios. It would be just so much fun to see. But speaking of things that are fun to see that run in more than one aspect ratio, we know that Hotego is working on the Capcom CPS 3, and presumably it'll be out in 2023, but there are no guarantees of that. But I can't wait to play this on my MiSTer, because again, the original hardware is just very finicky. If you don't have a multi with a decrypted security card, basically you're waiting for your hardware to break if you even so much kind of just bump it the wrong way. It is very sensitive hardware, and it is also extremely expensive hardware. I would love to own it, but I'm not going to spend like the $2,000 to buy a multi, so having it recreated in FPGA logic would be a ton of fun. Now, it's not the deepest library either, and that's another reason why I don't really ever want to buy the hardware, because there's not that many games on it, but there's a lot of fun to be had on it. Something like Red Earth here, definitely a flawed game, but looks absolutely beautiful, and I can't wait to see something like this coming out of MiSTer with that clean HDMI out, or even the analog I/O board, or something like Third Strike, another beautiful game. I definitely prefer SNK over Capcom when it comes to fighting games. That's just my preference. But again, I can't wait to play something like this on MiSTer because it's a gorgeous game, and I know this will enable more people to enjoy it, and I'm sure it'll start showing up at more tournaments because I know MiSTer is being used in some tournament settings for Capcom CPS and CPS2 stuff, so this will help the fighting game community, and it'll help us because we just get to play another awesome Capcom fighting game. But speaking of fighting games, something I really do hope comes soon is IGS PGM support, because while it's not as loved as Neo Geo or the CPS 2 or 3, there's still a ton of amazing games on it, and I know that Hotego was asking people in a poll about the PGM, so hopefully once CPS 3 is buttoned up, this might be something that is coming next, because it is really interesting hardware, works in a lot of the same manners as the Neo Geo, even if the hardware is different in certain aspects. But it's a fun board to collect for. But again, games are getting more expensive, and I know a lot of you aren't sitting around with closets filled with arcade hardware like I probably stupidly am. So to have something like PGM on MiSTer again would be a lot of fun, because something like Spectral vs. Generation is an absolutely fun fighting game. Sure, it's available on PlayStation 2, but I still think the PGM version is the best way to play, and honestly taking out my super gun and hooking this up to play on my couch is quite cumbersome, so if I could just top on my MiSTer and start playing, that would be great. It's got fighting games, it's got cave shmups, it's got beat 'em ups, it has everything I love, and I hope that you guys get to play it sometime in 2023. But that's my list. It's all realistic goals. I am not saying in any way, shape, or form that MiSTer is deficient for not having them. I'm just talking about what I would love to see come to MiSTer. But I do want those comments down below. You tell me what it is you would like to see in the future on the system as well. Just remember, MiSTer has a limited capability, so don't say PlayStation 3. Something like that's just never going to work. I'll have another video on MiSTer next Thursday. I'll have videos for the week as well. But yeah, 2023, let's hope we get some really amazing things. Bye-bye.